So we're coming up on chapter 11. Now, Revelation has 22 chapters, so we're halfway chapter-wise through the book. And when we get to, chapters 11 and chapters 12 is pretty much at the midweek of the tribulation. So we say the 7-year tribulation, we have tribulation, great tribulation, but midweek there's a lot of stuff that happens. There seems to be a turning of things, a changing of things, and just the narrative seems to change. And we'll get into that when we get into chapters 12, 13, 14, get pretty serious about stuff. And we're right now chronologically reading through chapter 11. We are in between trumpets. So we're on the where the sixth trumpet has sounded and the seventh has yet to be sounded. So we're in that 4, 2, 1. We are in between the sixth and the seventh trumpet. So we had two things we had 4 to establish, 2 kind of to set up something, an interim or an interlude, and then a conclusion. So we had the fifth trumpet was the bottomless pit being opened up, and there was a lot of weird stuff, a lot of demonic stuff happening there with this king that was put over these locusts that tortured people for 5 months, and then they went away. And then we had the sixth trumpet where the army of the east, and we'll get into this, especially when we get into Daniel, of the army of the east, because I think that was a question that we had a couple weeks ago of the two chariots went north and one went south, and they didn't mention anything about the other compass headings. And now we come to this army of the east. We'll do a little bit of backtracking on that because we didn't cover a few things on just a weird number, 200 million horsemen from this army of the east. So after we see an angel or a star fall with a key to open the bottomless pit. These demonic things that are said to be locusts that have women's hair, and they torture men, those that are unsealed. So this is judgment on those that have accepted the mark or have not accepted the mark of God, but have refused it and are unmarked. So they're free game. And then the sixth seal was the armies of the east. These angels get released from the Euphrates, and then these big armies come, and a third of mankind, I believe it says, is wiped out from this kind of display of things. They had all these colors. I tried to do research on what the colors were, and I think a majority of the flags, the majority of the banners that we currently have, all have at least, red, white, blue, or like a crimson, or yellow, or that they're all common colors. So you can't say, oh, that's these colors, they're specifically this person or that. Some people say the 200 million. If we go off the stats, I think they say that most standing armies is, I think somewhere it's less than 10% of adults or of people that are eligible. So we want to say 18 to 35 male. That's like for every one adult there, or for every 10 adults there's one, or there's I think it was 1 to 2 that are eligible. So whether they're too young, they're not a man, or they're elderly. So to get 200 million fighting a standing army of 200 million, there's only one country that can feasibly do that. That's China, but not saying that's what this army of the east is. But with numbers, they can far exceed that number of people. I don't know about being able to furnish them horses or whatever that means, but for 200 million men, they are the most likely candidate. And I think the next would be, some sort of confederation of the Eastern European, like Russia and things like that. But it doesn't matter who we tack onto that. But that was kind of curious that they gave a specific number, this big number of 200 million horsemen for this army of the East. So we had the fifth seal, which was demonic, a demonic army of sorts with the king over it. The sixth seal was this physical army that has these men, these actual men, so non-demonic army that kills a third of the earth. And after that sixth seal is blown, we get into the angel in the book, or the angel in the scroll, and we determined that was Christ with the open scroll because all the seals are broken. He gives that to John. John eats, and they say, prophesy to every man, every tribe, every tongue, every nation. So it seems like there's a shifting from off of Israel, or at least the sealing of Israel, or the focus on that, and going towards the Gentile nations of judgment. But then we'll come back to that in later chapters, because it seems like it goes back and forth, or there's a changing of sorts. So now we come up to chapter 11, and anybody want to read that through?
Yeah. Then I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, come and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there, but do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample over the holy city for 42 months. And I will grant my 2 witnesses authority to prophesy for 1,260 days wearing sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. And if anyone wants to harm them, fire pours from their mouth and consumes their foes. Anyone who wants to harm them must be killed in this manner. They have authority to shut the sky so that no rain may fall during the days of their prophesying. And they have authority over the waters to turn into blood and strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they desire. They have finished their testimony. The beast that comes from the bottomless pit will make war on them and conquer them and kill them, and their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that is prophetically called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. For 3.5 days, members of the peoples and tribes, languages, nations will gaze at their dead bodies and refuse to let them be placed in a tomb. And the inhabitants of the earth will gloat over them and celebrate and exchange presents, because these 2 prophets have been a torment to the inhabitants of the earth. But after the 3.5 days, the breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet, and those who saw them were terrified. Then they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, come up here. And they went up to heaven in a cloud while their enemies watched them. At that moment, there was a great earthquake. 1/10 of the city fell. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were terrified and gave glory to God of heaven. The second woe has passed. The third woe is coming very soon. The seventh angel blew his trumpet, and there was a loud voice in the heavens saying, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever. Then the 24 elders who sit on their thrones before God fell on their faces and worshiped God, singing, we give you thanks, Lord God Almighty, who are and who were, for you have taken your great power and begun to reign. The nations rage, but your wrath has come, and the time for judging the dead, for rewarding your servants, the prophets and the saints, and all who fear your name, both small and great, and for destroying those who destroy the earth. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and the ark of the covenant was seen within his temple. And there were flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and an earthquake, and heavy hail.
So we get this again on the seventh, just like on the 7th seal, there was a celebration, or just this sound of, almost like a sound of victory. We had that before the seals were even broken. There was a celebration. We decided that was just a abridged version of Revelation. Like it was, it has all, everything as it was beginning and end right there, kind of a summary of it. And then we have on the end of the 7th seal breaking, a song being sung. It looks like, well, it looks like just a promise of that. Like it says that they'll hunger no more, they'll thirst no more, the sun won't beat down on them. It was a promise to those that came out of the Great Tribulation after the seals have been broke. and then the 7 trumpets, that after the 7 trumpets are blown, there is this kind of a victory song. And the temple of God in heaven was open. The Ark of the Covenant appears. So we haven't seen the Ark of the Covenant since, 368 AD or BC, when Babylon destroyed the whole temple. Well, even before that, it was, when they destroyed the temple, the Ark of the Covenant went away. They did not. It was present in Solomon's temple. It wasn't present in Herod's temple, and so we don't know if Babylon took it and it just kind of went into obscurity, or God took it away because of such a holy relic, or nobody could even touch it. But it appears here, and there's tradition for the Jewish tradition. So this is in the Talmud, which is their traditions that they kind of came up with while they were in Babylon. They believe that the Ark of the Covenant, since it disappeared it disappeared with Babylon, that it would make a reappearance when God was coming back to earth, or when God was coming to establish his kingdom. The Ark of the Covenant would appear. This one, it's appearing in heaven, so there's a change in it, and we'll see later on in Revelation that not only does it appear, but it opens up, and there's a progression of sorts. So at first it was Heaven's tabernacle, and then we have Heaven's tabernacle with the Ark of the Covenant right now, and then later on we'll see it's Heaven's temple with the Ark of the Covenant, and then it opens up. And there's always, with the introduction, or with this kind of inauguration of sorts, that it's always followed by flashes of lightning, peals of thunder, and an earthquake, and a great hailstorm. And in Genesis, that's what happens when it's when God's coming to earth, these big storms and things happen. These big superstorm things happen when God is coming to earth, whether it's his Shekinah glory or when he's physically coming in Christ. But we're seeing that God is getting closer to earth, or getting closer to judgment. So these storms and things, they're almost I think of a movie set, like the little clicker board. Every time there's a scene, it's okay, when we see thunder, lightning, flashes of lightning, peals of thunder, earthquakes, and I don't know if a great hailstorm, if that is added onto it or if that's part of it, but they'll say a great storm. It's just think that's an event that's happening. So whether these are happening several times, there's several small earthquakes, hailstorms, and things, or these are all one. They're the same scene, shot from different angles or from different perspectives. So we get into, there's a few things that we can call back or recall on what we've looked in Zechariah, where it says the temple, John, he eats that scroll and he's told to prophesy, and then he's given a measuring rod and says, measure out the temple of God. And it says, measure out the temple, the altar, so we understand that to be the sacrificial altar and those who worship in it, and the court which is out, but leave out the court that's outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it's given over to the nations. So we understand that the temple, we have the holy place, the holy of holies, and then the temple court. If we're understanding what they're talking about, if they're talking about the tabernacle out in the wilderness, the outer court would be this, but that's where the priests were. If they're talking about the temple, there was even a greater court that surrounded even that, and they had, I believe they had the Gentile, or the court of the Gentiles, which was that's as close as the Gentiles could get. Then they had the court of the women, so even Jewish women could not go into where the court of the men were. So there was kind of this separation even within Judaism, that there was the court of the women, they could only go so far, the priests or the Levites would come out and talk with them, whether it be for it was almost like the Jewish temple was you go there for counseling, you go there for advice, you go there for any question you have. Am I ritually clean or not? I'm having trouble with my husband. I'm having we're going through some. You can go there for emotional counseling, spiritual counseling, for pain. It was kind of just the center of things. And so they had the court of the women, and usually it was raised up, so they were not even on the ground level. They were up on a kind of a second story that looked down. And then we had the court of the men, and that's where the Levites and everything were. So when it says measure the temple, it says measure the sacrificial altar and measure the holy place. It's talking about the interior. So we're saying measure out the tabernacle itself, but leave out the outer court. The court of the Gentiles, leave that because it's been given to them to trample. Let's see, and it says for 42 months, and we'll get. I noted that. So 42 months, 3.5 years, 1,260 days, time and a half. It's all the same. It's saying the same thing with different words. It's all meaning, 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days, or 1,260 days, and then a times time and a half a time is saying the same thing. So we have this 42 months, but we can translate that as anything for 3.5. And 3.5, we're understanding that as midpoint. So with trying to figure out where we're putting stuff at, we got to keep that in mind that we're working within 7 years. So there should be indicators of when a lot of people are looking for what is the kind of the indicator that starts the tribulation time, like set the timer. When that happens, we can go. We have things that are set up for it, like there's going to be a falling away. There's going to be false teachers and false prophets. People are going to be speaking peace when there isn't any. So we have this setup, but the event that sets the time, like, okay, so you got 7 years. This is where it's going to fall into. It's unclear. Now, last week I said, well, the rapture would most likely be the big event that, okay, some big change. But also, I say the rapture because of dispensational theology. They say that for the 7-year kind of honeymoon canopy. But then I was like, well, sometimes honeymoons get cut short. So it could happen. It could happen any time. And like I said, the establishing of the temple, the ingathering of Jews. We have a peace treaty, which could be the sign of things, but we have peace treaties leading up to that. So not even maybe 3 years ago under Donald Trump, we had the Abraham Accords, and that's when Christianity, Judaism, and Islam kind of all came together. The Abrahamic Accords, where they came together and they kind of said, yeah, we kind of all agree on this. Like they all have a common ancestry of sorts, and it was almost they were saying, okay, well, we'll back off a little bit. We'll come to agreement. Yeah, we kind of share similar histories. We just see them from different perspectives. But there was a peace treaty amongst the major religions, and I don't know if that's really the treaty or just a setup. It seems like it's just a setup for, what is this peace treaty that we're talking about? Is it peace treaty in the sense of there's no war? Well, when it says the seals are broken, men are going to war against one another. Is it going to be peace amongst the religious leaders? Is it going to be a political peace treaty? We know that there's things that are going to be set up. So whether the building of the third temple is going to be the kind of the start point, the rapture is going to be a start point, or they could happen out of sequence. It gets kind of muddled. after last week's meeting, I looked up Second Thessalonians, because they were talking about Paul was talking to that church about that very thing. If I can find it. Because that church was worried that they missed the rapture, and we covered this like the second week, so it's kind of not very strong in the memory. But it says, okay, brethren, with the regards to the coming of Jesus Christ, are gathering together to him, so talking about the rapture, that you not be quickly shaken from your composure or disturbed, neither by spirit or message or letter, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. So he's speaking when the day of the Lord comes, so he's speaking of the gathering together is the rapture, and the day of the Lord is when he comes. We're understanding that as two separate events. The gathering together is the church's rapture, and the day of the Lord is when he touches the ground, and he starts his rule by conquering. It says, "Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first." So apostasy is a falling away. So we can put that at before the 7 years, some sort of apostasy or falling away. And the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. So this Antichrist, or this man of lawlessness, is revealed. That needs to take place before these things. So it could happen here. It could be the start. It could be before the start of, or at midpoint. And there's different scriptures you can stand on and argue for it. And so I don't want anybody to say, "Oh well, it has to happen here. It has to happen here." Don't hang your hat of salvation on that. The rapture will take place. The thing that we can rule out some things, but we can't rule out all things. One scripture says that God has not destined us for wrath, which I believe that midpoint on this 3-year, this 3.5 year thing, this is the wrath to come. This is wrath on the Jews that aren't true Jews, the Gentiles that persecuted the true Jews, persecuted the church. Those that we'll read about this next week or the week after when it talks about, they will literally take a mark, just like those that were sealed in Christ, or sealed in Christ with the Spirit, the church, or the Jews that were sealed by God, the 144,000. They were sealed, and they didn't experience these, whatever you want to call them, murder hornets, or these locusts that come out. They weren't tortured, but everybody else was for 5 months. So it would seem like this is wrath. The wrath of this is direct punishment, and before it is the indirect, like we are suffering because somebody else is getting punished, but the other way is we are suffering because we're getting directly punished. So I believe that the rapture will have to take place before this wrath. There's not a direct, the church is not mentioned anymore, so there's nothing, it would seem like they are gone. If there are Christians, it's Christians that are not Jews that have accepted Christ during I think we said this last week, this 3.5 years, this is the ministry of the two witnesses. So we understood that 42 is 3.5 years. It would seem that there's a peace, some sort of peace treaty from the man of lawlessness. A fallen away has taken place. We already see that happening nowadays with a lot of denominations on the decline, and they're taking weak stances on certain issues to become more appealing to kind of this day, or this day and age. We're already seeing that, but they're saying there's going to be a great falling away. And then this man of lawlessness is revealed. He makes a peace treaty, and then these two witnesses have their ministry, and then after the 42 years, it says, or 42 months, it says that king that came out, that beast that came out of the abyss, or that came out of the bottomless pit, he's going to kill them. So we can understand that as the emerging of a figurehead that kills the witnesses, and then there's a change and stuff. So we'll look at 3.5 years prior and 3.5 years after the midpoint. We have the 144 being sealed, and then we have the 144 actually evangelizing or witnessing during the time of wrath. We have 2 witnesses evangelizing, and they are the ones that get actually saved, seal the 144. But the witnesses get taken, or they get killed. Their bodies are laying out for 3.5 days. Then they're bodily resurrected, and then they're spiritually resurrected afterwards. And then there's a big celebration when they're dead. But then there's great fear when they're brought up. There's something else. Let's see in 2 Thessalonians. And we know what restrains him now, so that this is the time he will be revealed. Verse 6. For the mystery of the man of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth. So that's talking about this is all going to happen at the end of things. That is, the one whose coming is according to the activity of Satan and all the power and signs and false wonders with all the deception and wickedness. Let's see. So I just read that in the sense that I was always thought that he was going to be revealed here at midpoint, but according to Paul, what he's saying is telling the church of Thessalonica that don't worry that Christ, they were worried that they missed the bus with the rapture. But he goes, you haven't missed it because these things haven't taken place yet. There's things that are going to happen after that, but these things must take place, so don't lose heart. If that makes sense.
Well, it seems like to me the coming of the Lord Jesus and our being gathered together to Him, and then the day that speaks of the day of the Lord. These are 2 different things. One is the glorious appearing, and the other is the rapture. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, but it's even going to get more confusing because I was reading elsewhere, and when we get into chapter 12 where it talks about Israel fleeing, that they are fleeing and they're going to be restored, or they're going to be sheltered for 1,260 days.
Yeah.
So there's going to be
Protection for the sealed ones.
It's my understanding that the 144 that are saved and sealed here, or at least we say saved, that are sealed, whether that is they accept the gospel and are Jewish, or that God just says, I'm going to say these are the remnant of Jews that may still be blind to the Messiah, but God's like, okay, I've always left a remnant. No matter how disobedient you are, there's always a remnant. That remnant of the 144, they go through the wrath, and we'll read. I think it's in Daniel. We'll read in that kind of the parallels, which leads me to believe that hey, there's this remnant. Well, midpoint that happens. There's a writing in Zechariah where it says Christ. It would seem that the Messiah comes, something happens, but the Messiah touches grass, but then there's still time before the end. So I don't know. This and the angel that has the scroll, the Christ that has the scroll, he gives it to John to eat, and it says that he is, he's Jesus. He appears later on with the 144,000, and it's just trying to I'm getting kind of bogged down with where things are placed at, and sometimes it's just like, okay, well, God will make sense of it. Just we know it's there, and sometimes it's confusing. Is this the mid-tribulation, the end of the tribulation, or does it happen in between or something? But yeah, my understanding is there is a separate of an appearing of Christ in the air, and then the appearing of Christ when he touches grass, are two separate events. But then I'm led to believe that there's two separate events here where he might appear for he appears for a time to save the remnant, let stuff happens, then he finally appears for the final battle. We'll get into that. It's a working theory, not saying it don't change anything. It's just trying to make sense of the Bible, and not just what's written in Revelation, but what the other prophecies that haven't been fulfilled, like how they all tie into one another. Let's see. So we'll get in, and I don't know if I touched on the woes. So we have the three woes that came from one of the trumpets. The fourth trumpet, when it is blown, there's an angel, or there's an eagle flying in mid-heaven that says, "Woe, woe, those who dwell on the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpets of the three angels who are about to sound." So after the seventh trumpet is blown and the bottomless pits open up, they say that's the first woe. And then some other things happen. So we have the bottomless pit, that was like really clean. First, the fifth trumpet blows, and they say that's woe number one. But then we have sixth trumpet. Sixth trumpet, Christ with the book gives it to John to eat. The witnesses come. The temple's measured, and the witnesses come. They witness, and then they get killed, and then they are revived and resurrected. But it says this is the second woe. So all that happens, and it's a trumpet blast and a half kind of a thing that happens. They say the second, and that's verse 14 of chapter 11. The second woe is past, behold, the third is coming quickly. Well, when we get to the third's coming quickly, it's never said, it's never stated that this is the third woe. So we should understand that the third woe is whatever comes out that if the fifth trumpet was the first woe, and the sixth trumpet was the second woe, because of all that stuff that's happening in between, we can understand that the seventh trumpet is the third woe, and all this other stuff happens. So from chapter 12 on to 17, 18, yeah. So we can understand that from the seventh trumpet in chapter 11 all the way to chapter 18, where it says Babylon has fallen, that is woe number 3. Even though it's not stated like explicitly, it's implied. If the fifth is the first and the sixth is the second, then the seventh is the third. That was just something that's always bothered me. Is I'm like, where's the third blast or the third woe at? It doesn't say. Okay, it must be everything that follows up until the fall of Babylon, and that was the whole woe, is Babylon's fallen in chapter 18. Something interesting. We were talking about the two witnesses in Zechariah, and we understood those to be Zerubbabel, which was the governor that oversaw the temple being built, and Joshua, who was kind of the high priest at the time of the temple being built. We understood those to be the two witnesses, because God said, "These are my two witnesses." Zechariah, in one of his visions, we understand it to be that that's what he was pulling from. John pulls a lot from Zechariah, but then we read.
I thought it was Moses and Elijah.
Well, yeah, and we read how they're describing them. We read how the two witnesses are being described. It says the witnesses have the power to shut up the sky. So Elijah did that during his ministry. He shut the sky up and angered Ahab and Jezebel, and it did not rain. And that's stated not only Old Testament, but the book of James says that, Elijah was a man like our disposition, and he prayed and it did not rain. And it says they have the power to shut the sky so that rain will not fall during the days of their prophesying, and they have power over the waters to turn them into blood. That was one of the plagues of Egypt of Moses. That was the first plague, was turning the Nile to blood. And to strike the earth with every plague as often as they desired. The only person we know that's able to strike with plagues is Moses. I don't think there's anybody else in the Bible that has that title of striking with plagues. We think of the 10 plagues of Egypt. Oh, that's the only time they sent plagues.
Yeah.
Throughout the Old Testament and New Testament, we know about getting struck with leprosy, but that wasn't really a plague of a supernatural plague, but they understood that as that was God punishing someone for something. But Moses was the only one that was known to make plagues fall on people. And they were able to call fire from the sky. And if anyone wants to harm them, fire flowed out of their mouths and devoured their enemies. Is there anybody else in the Bible that was able to do that? Or anything that describe? I can't think of anyone. The only one I can I remember, and I can't remember if it was. Maybe it was I think it was Elisha, when the commanders went to talk with them, and he goes, "If I'm a prophet of God, let fire come down from heaven." And that happened like 2 or 3 times. And then one of the guys said, "Don't let the fire come down. Just go talk to this guy." He goes, "Okay, I'll do that." But that was coming fire from heaven rather than fire out of their mouths. But yeah, the way it's described when we're reading, hey, that sounds like Moses and Elijah. But when we look back in the Old Testament about 2 witnesses, we go back to Zechariah, where it has Zerubbabel and Joshua as figures, so we can understand, well, a governor figure Zerubbabel, a representative figure Moses, a priest figure Joshua, a prophet figure Elijah. So we can understand, yeah, it could be them, but I think the reason why they were not like explicitly put is because it was kind of a type of, and it could be that it's not even a resurrection of these 2. Like we see throughout the Bible that the spirit of Elijah comes. In Malachi it says, "I'll send Elijah, and then the Messiah is going to come." And then they even asked John the Baptist, "Are you Elijah?" And he goes, "No," but we understand him to be in the spirit of Elijah. He comes, and then Christ, he's the forerunner, and then Christ appears. When Christ was, when he was transfigured, he said Moses and Elijah showed up, and Peter's like, let's build 3 tents, one for you and one for Elijah, one for Moses. And so we see this. Elijah is going to be appearing throughout Scripture, so we can understand. Yeah, one of them should be. It would make sense for him to be Elijah because he appears, and then the Messiah, Christ, comes. He sets the way, or sets it up. He makes the way, make the highway straight for the Lord to travel, and then Christ actually physically appears again, just like John the Baptist was born physically before Christ, but then he goes, no, he was there before. He appeared before I was born. And yeah, that's how I understood it. But I think the reason why it's not explicitly stated is because it could be these specific people, or it could be somebody that represents this. If we understand, or if we believe that the temple is built, you need to have priests. You need to have priests, prophets. Well, you need to have a high priest. You need to have the Levitical priesthood. You need to have the administration to run the temple. If you have a temple and nobody to run it, it's kind of like having a church without the people. So if we believe that the temple is going to be built, if there's going to be a precursor to everything, there's going to be the temple built, there's going to be an ingathering of Jews. It could be that we could say Moses, Zerubbabel, Elijah, Joshua figure, whether it is, a resurrection of Old Testament figures, or if it's actually, well, these are people that are going to be in likeness of that. If there's going to be a high priest, whoever the high priest is going to be, and whoever his the representative, the governor, whoever's the leader of Jerusalem at the time this happens, and then whoever the high priest is, so a governor, the representative, or the president, or prime minister, and the some sort of religious authority figure, whether it be a prophet, a high priest, or a Levitical priest. Are they going to be? Is it going to be two people that are going to be the two witnesses? Is it going to be two groups of people? Some people believe that these two witnesses are part of the seven churches, so that could lean on why the rapture doesn't take place till later on. These two churches are witnesses at the time, and they evangelize, and then they're killed, but they're resurrected. They are raptured in a second rapture of sorts. It's a theory. My understanding is that these are Jewish people. These are Jewish people, whether Old Testament people kind of reiterated, or people that are acting in their stead. Just like John the Baptist said, "I'm not Elijah," but he acted as Elijah. He was a new person, but acted as Elijah. Or if it's going to be if it's going to be something new, or it's just going to be a repeat of something old. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go back with the little time we have. Daniel, we'll go to the end of Daniel and work our way, because Daniel talks about, or just reading it recently, I found it curious that they mentioned something that applied to this chapter, or it seemed like something that applied to this chapter. So the end of Daniel, so chapter 12. Okay, yeah, chapter 12. The verse 5, it says that, Michael comes and talks with Daniel, but then it gets into it in verse 5. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, so Michael was there, and he looked, and there was two others standing on the bank of the river, and the other on the bank of the river, so two standing on the banks of the river. And one said to the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, "How long will it be until the end of these wonders?" I heard the man dressed in linen, who was who raised his right and left hand towards heaven, sworn by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times, and a half a time. And as soon as they finished shattering the power of the holy people, all the events will be completed. As for me, I heard, but could not understand. So I said, "Lord, what will be the outcome of these events?" And he said, "Go your way, Daniel, for these words are concealed and sealed up for until the end times. Many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand. But those who have insight will understand. From the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished," so we understand that to be the mid-trib, the abomination of desolation, the regular sacrifice is abolished, and the abomination of desolation, or what was it? What does your translation say?
Here it says abomination that desolates.
Okay, the abomination desolates. There's a few other words for it, but the AOD, the abomination of desolation, or the abominable thing that causes desolation.
Yeah.
From that time, regular sacrifice and the abomination of desolation, it is set up that will be 100. Okay, and here's we have 42 months, 160 days, but this one
190.
says 190 days, so there's a 30-day difference.
No, it says 1,290.
90. Then it says, "How blessed is the one who keeps waiting and attains to 1,335 days.
Yeah.
But as for you, go on your way to the end, and you will enter into rest and rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age. So, I have a theory on that. I think I made mention of it, and I had to do a little bit more research. So, for the solar calendar, so our calendar, Gregorian calendar, we have 364.25 days. So 364, wait, is it 365 days and a quarter?
In a year.
In a year. So every 4 years, we have a leap year, or a leap year which we get an extra day.
Yeah.
The Jewish lunar calendar, they have every 3 to 4 days, or every 3 to 4 years,
They add a whole week or month.
they add a whole month, a 30-day month onto it. So I don't know where I put that at, but here it is. The lunar calendar is 365 and a quarter days, or the solar calendar. Lunar calendar is 354 days. So that's a difference of 11 and a quarter. So every 3 to 4 years, they will add an extra month in, and they have their whole way of determining. Like they say, it happens 11 times every 19 years, or something like that. They're able to divide it. And if you're really curious, the month of Adar, they have Adar and they have Adar 2. So when it's a leap year, when it is a leap year, they add a month, and they just add they say this is Adar and this is Adar 2. So they'll just add an extra month of 30 days. It's my belief that extra 30 days is because, and this is just a theory, that, well, within 7 years, you're at least going to have one leap year. If it's every 3 to 4 years, you're likely to have at least one leap year within that 7. So it could be that a leap year happens right before the 7-year tribulation, and then during the end of the tribulation, there's a leap month added, if that makes sense. That's why there's a discrepancy from 3.5 years, 420 months, 1,260 days, and then he goes, blessed is the one who attains to the 130 or 1,335. The difference of that, 45. If my math's right.
Yeah, 45. And the other is.
Yep. It's 45 days difference. We'll get into it next week about kind of a theory on that. One is, like I said, there's a leap year at the end. Another is when we talk about the festivals and stuff, where if there is a leap year, and I'm still working out that if it isn't a leap year, then or a leap month, then there's a 75-day difference, and I think it might correlate with the last ending festivals to be taken care of. And I think it does talk about that in Daniel, but I don't think we have.
How many years is it that they add a month on?
It's every 3 to 4, and I don't know because it's 11 and a quarter days difference from the solar and the lunar calendar. So they say every 3 to 4 years. Ours, we just say every 4 years because it's a quarter. So we say every 4 years we add an extra day, and then it lines it out.
They add a whole 30-day month?
They add a 30-day month every 3 to 4 every 3 to 4 years, and it's not clear. And they'll say, oh, this is there's four different Jewish calendars. There's the civil calendar, there's the religious calendar, and I forget what the other two are. So it's real confusing, but they have it all figured out. Like I said last week, where their new year doesn't line up with like the new year on their calendar. It's like, no, this is our Jewish New Year, not our civic New Year, if that makes sense. I need to look into that. They have, like I said, they have that pattern of, well, every 19 years it happens 7 times. That, like, the occurrence. Every 19 years we have 7 leap years in that 19-year sequence. And it's not cut and dry because 7 doesn't go into 19 perfectly. So they say, well, just say every 3 to 4 years we have, they figure it out because they have to get all their festivals and everything. And they have, we have that joke of if a kid's born on a leap year on the solar calendar, they're technically, they're 12 years old. Well, actually, they're 3 years old because this only occurs every, it's only occurred 3 times even on a leap. There's only been 3 leap years within the 12-year sequence of sorts. They have something like if a boy's born in first Adar, that's the new, I think that's what it is. Second Adar is what the month of Adar is always the second Adar, and if it's the new year, they say, first Adar. They throw in a new month. First Adar, second Adar. And just like they don't even go by the Jewish calendar doesn't even have the same year. We go from birth of Christ, or around the time of birth of Christ for the Gregorian calendar, and the Jewish calendar goes differently. So we're in 2023 since Christ was the time that he was born, and they say 5,784 years since creation. That's how they do their years. That works out because we'll go over, next week if we have time, we'll go over some of the things of Daniel. Let me see, we'll go over, how much time do we have? We're on the money here. We'll go to Zechariah real quick. I found something interesting I wanted to point out real quick. If you haven't read through, we'll go over things that pertain to Zechariah, or that pertain to Revelation through Daniel and we'll finish up Zechariah. We did most of the beginning of Zechariah, and then the end of it is more mid-tribulation, or tribulation, and also millennial reign is towards the end. Something in chapter 13. It says, verse 7, it says, "Awaken, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the men, my associate. Declares the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, that the sheep may be scattered. And I will turn my hand against the little ones. It will come about in all the land, declares the Lord, that 2 parts it will be cut off and perish, but the third will be left in it. And I will bring the third part through the fire, refine them as silver is refined, and test them as gold is tested. They will carry on my name, or they will call on my name, and I will answer them. I will say, these are my people, and they will say, the Lord is my God." And did we just not? It seems like we just read that in Daniel too, or Daniel, the end of Daniel also. Something that sounds similar to that. Do you have Daniel's or anybody have the end, or Daniel 12 pulled up?
Yeah.
Near the end, it doesn't mention something about refining. Many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand. This idea, and we talked about this at the beginning of the 144,000 that are being sealed. They endure through this, and it would seem that is the Jewish remnant. That whether they believe in the Messiah or not, God's like, I will always leave a remnant for my people. Whether it's judgment, there's always somebody that goes through it. They have I forget where it says, if the Lord did not leave us a posterity, we'd be like Sodom, we'd be like Gomorrah. Like, if God was not merciful to us, he would have killed us off in the wilderness, but he left the next generation to learn. And if God did not hold back something, we would be completely cut off. And so this idea continues. The 144,000, they will go through the wrath as a refining fire. It says, I'll refine them as silver is refined and test them as gold is tested. And curious enough, there's also this thing of 1/3. It says 2/3 will be cut off, but 1/3 will be left in. And that 1/3 will pass through the fire and be refined. So it would seem, we'll get into, in verse 13 it's talking about, it would seem like 13 is talking about this refining of the whole nation of Israel, but it's saying that like the false prophets are going to be judged. It says the father and the mother, verse 3, if anyone still prophesies, then his father and his mother who gave birth to him will say, you shall not live, for you have spoken falsely in the name of the Lord. There's going to be a change of heart in Israel where this falling away, this speaking falseness. If you remember that scroll that God has judged over this, those that speak falsely and those that swear falsely and those that steal. So it's like civil disobedience and religious disobedience. Those that swear falsely or falsely prophesy and those that steal. It would seem that there's a change of heart when God's Spirit gets poured on them, or God gives them an understanding to the Jewish people that they're going to purge out the false prophets. And not only that, there's going to be a great slaughter where it says 2/3 are going to be, did it say 2/3 will be cut off? So 2/3 will be cut off.
And perish.
Measuring, and we didn't even get to measuring the temple, the idea. That's early in Zechariah where it says when you see Zerubbabel with the plumb line in his hand, the measuring of things, when 2/3 are measure the temple but leave out the outer court. So we still got, you want to think about 1/3 is the holy. We have the Holy of Holies, or we at least have the tabernacle, but the outside is given to the Gentiles, and the Jews that have never. We talked about this, that Jewish men were not permitted. If you were not a Levite, you were not permitted past. You're not permitted past the base and the purification water. That was only for the priest. Well, it said, measure from the holiest or the holiest place to the sacrificial altar, but leave everything. Leave that, or measure that, but leave everything else out. For the Jewish person that has never entered into that person, those that were on the fringe, those are cut off, but those that are inside will be left in and to be refined. If you want to think of it, the 144,000 to be left inside the tabernacle when the temple gets built, there's an ingathering, there's peace, people are making the sacrifices. Those that are true Jews, when problems come, and this is a thing that a recurring theme, they come and take the horns of the altar for protection. If you were in trouble, if a king was like, if he wanted to save his life, he ran and grabbed the horn of the altar because he couldn't be killed on the altar. It was kind of like, as kids, like playing tag. That was home base. That was safe. The Jews that come and take the horns of the altar are safe. The 1/3, the remnant, and those that don't think to take hold of the altar just say, "Oh, we'll get through it. We got the temple. We're good. We'll just stay in Jerusalem. Jerusalem won't have a problem." When Jerusalem's attacked, those are the 2/3 that are cut off, and the 1/3 remnant is inside. Or something curious when it talks about that this 1/3 of things in the plagues, 1/3 of the water, 1/3 of this dies, and it progresses to the end where it says now they're all going to be dead. 1/3 of the Jews that are in Jerusalem at the time, or my theory, 1/3 is going to be passing through as someone refines gold, as somebody that refines silver. They're going to be tested by fire through the wrath. But we'll get into more of that next week when we'll get through the chapters, and then we'll try to go back and go through Daniel and Zechariah.